I just downloaded this app, so hopefully it works. I wanted to, before I did anything else today, in honor of a man that a lot of us knew, passed away this past week. In honor of Boston Lenny, welcome to the House of Pain. That's what he always used to say, and in a lot of ways he was right. I haven't prepared and wrote some notes this time. So, that's how I used to drink alcohol. Now, when I was thinking of that for an opening, I was going to get a real size bottle. But the problem is I'm on the north side of 55 now, and if I would have done that, we'd have to take an intermission halfway, so I'd go take a leak. So, when I retired as a teacher, I thought I was going to copy all my teacher stuff to my Google Drive. In the process, I lost everything that was on my Google Drive, and I had my steps and everything else that I had done. So I had to redo this, but this was my list that I came up with for myself, just see if you can relate a little bit. It's called You Might Be an Alcoholic If. You wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is head to the garage to take a couple swigs. That was me. This goes along with what Wendy said. Your wife finds your bottle, dumps it. I forgot to throws it at you part. But it's no big deal because I got a lot more than that. That happened. You refill empty water bottles with vodka because no one will know the difference. You go out to your vehicle after a meeting, open the console, and drink on the way home. You hide bottles in the live well of your boat because no one in their right mind would stick their head in that stinky mess. I didn't fish for a long time once I sobered up because it's just that connection. See if you ever did this one. You find a bottle you thought was empty, but then proceed to drink the little dribbles in the bottom. Look how big I wrote that. I was really smart, man. You face sleeping away from your wife because then she couldn't smell it on you. This one's true I'm not proud of. Wendy was not with me, but you have to puke but don't quite get the car door open in time. You have the liquor stores mapped out because you don't want to go to the same one too often. They might think you're an alcoholic. And I had to look this one up. The first thing you do when you buy booze is remove the spill guard because that slows the flow. That's what the little plastic thing in there. I didn't know what the official name was. What was it called? A spill guard. So you can go home educated tonight. So, I'm supposed to talk about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So, what it was like, it sucked. What happened, it got better. What it's like now, it's great. So, thank you. No, I was really tickled when I came in. I have some high school friends here. Now, one, Dave, we've hooked up recently and started working out together again. And Kurt lives in the area, but my other friend, she grew up in the neighborhood with us. She came all the way from Milwaukee, so that was kind of cool. And Kelly's got some of her friends from a long ways away. I hope I'm not just... Oh, I forgot too. If you were on Facebook at all today, every single one of those acts I had booked canceled. The Dancing Bear, the Chippendales, sorry ladies, but so all you get's me. One of my friends that's here probably remembers this, what it was like. Well, the first time I remember ever getting really drunk was, I think it was 8th grade or 7th grade, I don't know. We were at my girlfriend's house in the basement, no one was home, and I got really, really wasted. Lucky I had my 2 friends with me, and we walked. Do you remember? All the way home. I don't know how I even got away with that. I just told my mom I didn't feel good. I don't know. I think she drove by us, too, when we were walking. Crazy. So Other than that, though, I was always into athletics and everything. I didn't really like go out partying with people. I was the kid that went to bed at 9:30 at night most of the time. But it was already started. When I drank, it was for one purpose only: get obliterated. So I came from one of those families that, it was all about appearances. We had to appear normal. And, if we didn't talk about it, it didn't exist. And I remember my junior year in high school, it was hot in here. One day I came home after football practice, and my dad tells me, your mom's in Stoughton. I'm like, what is mom in Stoughton for? Well, she was in treatment. I had no clue. And I guess from talking to him later, they would go down in the basement and argue or whatever. But how it was, I never visited her in treatment. Mom was just gone for a month, came back home, just pretended it never happened. I don't remember even ever hearing my mom talking about going to meetings or anything. I know she did, because when I started getting coins, she's like, we didn't get those only a year. And I'm like, well, I got 6 months one. Of course, I had to give that one back, like when you talked about. That happened twice. But then college came, and he's my brother-in-law now, but he was one of my fraternity brothers too. We were the drinking fraternity. I was going to wear it, but there's no way it would fit. Now, we used to have T-shirts. I still have them in the closet, but every year we would have what was called the SIG Olympics. We were Sigma Chi, and it was all drinking games. They would go down to the field house and in the pool. You had to chug a liter of beer, swim a lap. I mean, it was just ridiculous. But we had shirts that said, drink for those who can't. And we did. But it was always the same thing. I just got wasted. There was no in between. The faster, the better. So after college, I probably maybe occasionally had a beer now and then for 20 years. In 1992, my first son was born, Jeffrey, and me and his mom got married in 1993. You can do the math there. That doesn't work out very well, but I was kind of old-fashioned guy. Okay, you got to get married or whatever. So, and then my other son, Jacob, he was born 2 years later in 1994, and that marriage lasted 7 years. The alcoholism really didn't play a part at all. I don't know why, but there was a lot of lying and deceit and everything going on. So I got divorced. But I didn't like being alone. So I think I was divorced 4 months or whatever, met another woman, moved in together. She had 2 girls. And it was going all right for a while. We actually went to marriage counseling and that kind of thing. And I still wasn't drinking very much at the beginning of that. But as things went on, it started up. And that was my rebound marriage. Started drinking a lot. About kind of towards the end of our marriage, that's when that show Moonshiners came out. And I thought, I can do that. And you don't even need one of them big fancy stills like they got. If you know about how condensation works and that kind of stuff, you need a couple buckets. But I couldn't stop at normal stuff. I made liquor you could burn in your car. E85 has nothing on it. I got up to 190. And I drank it. You know why? Because I didn't have to drink very much of it to really get wasted. Meanwhile, I'm destroying my body because your body cannot handle that. And then the last couple years of that marriage we were just living together, and I would just get wasted at night. I can remember days. I didn't drink at school at all at that time. I was a teacher. But man, was I hungover, and I bet if they'd have gave me a breathalyzer a few times, I still would have had some on my breath in the morning. And, it's just that progression. I was at another stage. So that marriage ended, and I met, third time's the charm, Wendy. We had known each other. We drove together to her brother's wedding in the same car and everything. But it was kind of one of those things, and Jeff and I never talked about it, but I'm sure he knows what I'm talking about. It was like, don't mess with my sister kind of thing to all the fraternity brothers. I did go over, and I asked her out once, and we dispute this or whatever, but I swear she turned me down, and I don't know how that story goes. So we went our separate ways. So that was kind of the history. Just like most of us in here, I started out small. When Wendy and I first got together, I was drinking a little bit. And she still wonders where that bottle of Bailey's went that was in the Lazy Susan. And I don't even remember, but I'm sure it didn't go straight in the trash. But started out a little. And, I was smart. I'm an educated person, I thought. So I kind of did the math, and I figured I get home at 4. She gets home 5:30. I got that window of opportunity. So I would get home from school, go down in the basement. And at first it was pretty controlled. I knew about how much, and I figured I'll be pretty sobered up by the time she gets home. So it started like that. But that addiction kicks in, and I wanted it faster. I couldn't get it fast enough. So that's hence chugging a bottle like that. But what I don't realize is, I'm getting it faster, and then I've went over way past that line. And when I used to start feeling better, I was feeling worse. I was getting wasted. It got to the point I would come home, do my thing, and take a nap. And Wendy's trying to wake me up. I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but Wendy would be waking me up from a nap 7, 8 o'clock at night because I wasn't taking a nap. I was passed out. That's the other thing when you're drinking all the time. Yes, you pass out, but you're not really getting any rest. I was tired all the time. I would wake up in the morning and I would be thinking about taking my nap after school all day. And it got to the point, I'll never forget this. I taught everything from kindergarten to 7th grade, but mainly 4th and 5th for the longest periods. And I think I was teaching 4th grade or whatever. And a good activity after recess was I'd do read aloud. And the kids would catch me nodding off during read aloud. Some of that had to do with I found out I had sleep apnea along the line here too. But, it was just crazy. I'll never forget. I don't remember what year it was or whatever, but it was to the point I was calculating this again. If I get up at 5, take a couple swigs, I should be sobered up by 8 o'clock when school started. Well, that worked. I won't claim I never had alcohol in my breath during school hours, but I didn't drink before school. Eventually, it got to where I had to go out to the car at lunchtime a little bit, just to keep the shakes down. But I'll never forget, there was this one little girl, and her name was Clara. And for some reason, I don't remember what exactly it was or whatever, but I was going to show her a picture on my phone. Speaking of, I hope this is still working. Yep. So I take my phone out to show her the picture of whatever it was. And she asked me, "Mr. Pettit, why are you shaking?" And I gave her an honest answer the more I thought about it. I didn't have my medicine this morning. That was more true than it wasn't. But yeah, it got really crazy. So things went on, and Wendy put up with a lot. I thought I was sly, but I would catch myself slurring words, and it's crazy. Why she stuck with me, I don't know. So anyway, so I had a younger brother. He was 7 years younger than me, and we never really got along. I think it was a generation thing or whatever. I was always pissed because he got away with everything, and I was the one that got all the butt whoopings and whatever. But he just kind of, I never really saw it from his point of view. He was probably in a bad spot too. He just led a rough life. He was in and out of college 3 or 4 times or whatever, always moving back in with mom and dad and whatever. Well, it was right after me and Wendy got together, probably 2012 or 13. He was in the hospital at UW, and he had some bleeding or something in his stomach, and they couldn't stop. They thought he was going to die. And they put a balloon down his throat and blew it up in his belly or whatever. But it was one of my first really powerful spiritual experiences. My mom and dad had left, and me and Wendy were sitting there with him, and we're holding his hand. And that would just devastate my parents, which eventually anyway. But we were praying over him and said, just let us know you're going to be all right. He squeezed our hand. We were about jumped out of the room. So eventually he got better, but he was one of us. He was in and out of meetings and stuff. Well, in 2016, he passed away. And even though we never really got along well or whatever, it was just, you hear people at meetings say you don't want to die from this disease. I remember Chuck always talks about the doctor telling him that. You don't, because I saw it and lived it. And, if you want to be laying on a couch, someone changing your pants, and at the end, my parents were having to give him morphine. I couldn't imagine doing that to your own kid. And he's just living in squalor. His house was just a disaster. He passed away. And I got the job of cleaning up the house. Fine. I kind of knew what I was in for. And my parents were so proud of him because he knew he was going to die eventually, and he had saved up money for his funeral and this and that. Well, once he passed away, I found out how he was saving up money. I go down in the basement, and here in the corner, I hear this radio playing. What the hell is like WJVL or something? But it's got like this box with this door on it. I open it up. He's growing marijuana in his basement. I never messed with that stuff at all. A couple times in college, maybe, but I'm like, holy crap! What am I gonna do? So, of course, I had to go out to the car and drink a little bit, think about it. But I had a really good relationship with the school resource officer, and I thought, I'm gonna call him. So I called him up. I'm like, my brother just passed away. I don't want to be associated with this stuff, this and that. And he's like, oh, just call the non-emergency line. It happens all the time. So I did. And they came over with their cars. They had one benefit is we got a lot of Menards buckets out of it. We're still behind our shed. But the cops came over, took the buckets out in the yard, took the plants out, threw them in the trunk of their car, and are on their way. I didn't do any paperwork, nothing. But she had always hidden all that stuff from my dad. And I found other things that were beyond that. I know they were crack pipes and stuff. But the family history, you don't talk about it, doesn't exist. And I had to swear to my mom that night that I would never tell my dad. And I never did, but that was hard. That was a heavy burden to carry. And I can remember cleaning that house out, and I would just be wasted all the time because I just couldn't deal with it. And luckily for us, everyone needs a friend like this. And I'm not going to say his name because he comes around sometimes, but my brother had this friend, and my mom says, call him up. Okay. So I call him up. I said, hey, I got all this junk out in the yard. Get rid of it for me. Okay, $50. All right. Well, then a couple times he comes over. He's like, you ain't got to pay me money. I said, your brother used to. I'm like, don't even go there. Okay. So my brother lived in a neighborhood where if you put something on the curb and went out to eat lunch, it's gone. So that wasn't so bad. But that devastated my parents. That was their little baby. Anyway, so I got over that. Drinking's getting worse. And I still remember one day, we had our couch that's at your mom's now. I remember kneeling on the floor and telling Wendy, I'm an alcoholic. I can't do this anymore. And Wendy's a former social worker. So she goes into social worker mode. She's looking all this stuff up. You need to go here, there, do this. And if your alcoholic mind's like mine at all, that was not the right thing to do. But she did get me to go to a meeting. And that's the meeting that I go to almost every day now over at Wesley Avenue. And I remember back then walking in the door, and it was not a pleasant entryway back then. But no one could see you. You could still change. There was double doors. You could still change your mind and leave. But I went in and I sat down, and a gentleman, I've said this at the meeting before, a gentleman came up to me and made me feel like, like my friends from high school, like he knew me his whole life. And I thought, wow, that ain't it. Because, an alcoholic to me was the bum on the street with the brown paper bag, peeing all over himself or whatever. I kind of learned that day, alcoholism does not discriminate. Doesn't care where you're from, doesn't care what race you are, doesn't care how much you have or don't have, just wants everything. And up to that point, it was starting to be everything. So I started going to AA meetings. And, you kind of get into it. But, my mathematical mind thought, I could get drunk driving from the Wesley Avenue meeting. If I hadn't drank anything at all, I could get drunk driving from there to our house, which is, I see it on my car, like 3.5 miles. But the other thing that was kicking in is after a while, people, they can really hold their liquor. That might be true to a point. But then your body starts shutting down and it reverses. And it wasn't taking as much to get drunk. And that's where I ran into problems, is if I drank the same much that I drank a couple years earlier, it was like way overboard. But I didn't stay sober, and I gave back my coins twice. I don't remember how far I had gotten or whatever. But, a little bit of that responsibility and being accountable and stuff. Well, at first it was, wow, look at these people get their coins. Everyone tells them good job, pats them on the back, whatever. And you kind of get caught up in that a little bit. And I did. So I'd get a coin for 30, a coin for 60 or whatever. Then after a while, they say, keep coming back. You'll get it. And it was starting to sink in. And I'm like, I can't keep lying to these people. So I don't know if Greg was there. I don't know if anyone was, but I stood up at that meeting twice and turned my chips back in. And you talk about humbling. But if you're going to the right AA meetings with the right people, that's okay. They get it. Welcome back. Start over. I hear people still to this day, they went back out drinking for a day, a week, whatever. I lost all that time. No, you didn't. You're just starting over at that point, but you got all this experience. So once I kind of got over that hump, I had started seeing a counselor in Milton named Ray Hadley. I don't know if anyone's familiar with him, but he was exactly the kind of guy I needed. I went through my steps with him, with my sponsor involved too, but I did a step a week. A couple times he said, you've been working really hard, take this week off. But it was a step a week. There was none of this on my fourth step after 2 years or whatever. I said a couple times later, you either get busy living or get busy dying. Well, I had went down the dying road. It was time to start living a little bit. And one of Ray's favorite things to say to me is, And I really don't curse much anymore. It's just a personal decision. I don't hold it against anybody or whatever. It's a control thing. But he would just sit there in the chair and tell me, shit is still going to happen. That's how you deal with it. One of the other things I learned from him was, for a long period in my life, alcohol had a big chunk of the pie. Now that chunk's gone. What are you going to fill it with? And I chose to fill it with God and my higher power and spiritual things and whatever. So everything was going pretty good. Then I looked up my medical records because I wanted to make sure I got this right, because every other time I've did this on the way home, Wendy's like, you forgot this. So I made an outline. November 23rd, 2017, I remember I was standing in the bathroom and I couldn't move. And I ended up sitting on the floor, and I told Wendy, I said, this is the worst pain I ever felt in my life. I thought I was having a massive heart attack or whatever. So she called the ambulance, and I don't know what you've seen on TV. If you haven't ridden in an ambulance, it ain't nothing like TV. It's freezing cold. It's freaking bumpy. I mean, if you weren't dying before you got in there, by the time you got to the hospital. So they tested me for pancreatitis, and then my liver problems started showing up. If you never had pancreatitis, it is painful. So I was in the hospital 3 or 4 days. Up to that point, I think I had started my Armor of God Facebook group, because I remember while I was in the hospital, Wendy took over for me for a couple of days. We felt that responsibility. That's kind of like our ministry, and it's as much for us as anyone else. I just like to share all the positive things. I really try to surround myself with positive things now. It's really easy to get sucked into that negative. So everything was going good, and then March 4th, 2018 hits. And if you want to see it, I don't think you want to, but I woke up in the middle of the night violently ill and just puked pure blood in the toilet. And for whatever reason, I took a picture of it, and I still have it. Holy crap. And I woke Wendy up, and I looked at I threw up blood like 6 times is what the medical report turned out. Well, my counselor went over this with me. When you start jacking up your liver, your blood flow through your liver gets like clogged up and blocked. It builds up pressure. And what happens, for whatever reason, the routes they take or whatever, the veins in your throat and your esophagus get big, like varicose veins on your legs. Well, mine burst. That's where all the blood was coming from. And I didn't know. And they said it was a good thing that we got to the hospital when we did, because you could bleed out really easy from that. So I had surgery. They banded them up and whatever they did. And then I had a follow-up an appointment. They had to do whatever it is, laparoscopy or whatever. And they did a colonoscopy at the same time. And I told the doctor, I said, I hope you do the throat first. So, of course, I'd have been knocked out. I wouldn't know the difference. So everything's going good, and then the day. You see, all this stuff, I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. I was still jacking around a little bit, still drinking. And in fact, I was looking at the hospital report, and it said I told the doctor I hadn't had a drink in a while. And then the other time it was 3 weeks or whatever. None of that stuff stopped me. Even the throwing up the blood, I wasn't done yet. Until June 12th, 2018, and I put on my thing here, the day. If anybody's ever worked in education at all or anything like that dealing with kids, the power that children have nowadays is pretty incredible. It was like the last week or two of school. We had a 0 tolerance cell phone policy. And this girl had her phone out in class. And I'm like, give me the phone. And it was a big, huge hassle. I ended up just calling security or whatever. Well, that pissed her off. Next thing I know, I'm in the principal's office because I made sexual advances towards her. And that was just devastating. Here, all my career holds in the balance of a lie. Luckily, I got the other kids were witnesses and everything. Everything worked out. But then the last day of school came, I think it was 2 days before that, June 10th. And okay, I got the summer off. Well, on June 10th, I woke up. I don't remember much from that day. Probably the same as always, morning routine, drinking a little bit. I built a really beautiful rose garden in our front yard that I have no memory of building, but it's still there, so I did a good job. Apparently, I had a conversation. Wendy told me this. I had a conversation with the guy across the street. He's a big drinker too, but I don't think he thought anything was going on. I do remember that day I jacked up my lawn sweeper because I was going to sweep the hill out back, which is like a 60-degree angle, and it tipped over and everything else. So I don't know the exact times. Wendy might know, but about 3 o'clock or so, I was really wasted by then. I sent her a text message, you better do something or you better get me into treatment or I'm going to kill myself. Blow my effing brains out. So meanwhile, after that, I passed out on the couch. And I woke up to an officer shaking me or whatever, and in the background, a guy going through my house with an assault rifle. Well, when she called 911, are there any weapons in the house? Yes, we had a little .22 pistol in the basement that we'd pop off up at her mom and dad's sometime. So they had the street blocked off and all this other stuff for a drunk. Wendy's dealing with all the neighbors. Oh, what's going on? I got a right to know this and that. I can't imagine what she went through. And, I forgot I'll get to that. But they gave me a choice. You can either go see your counselor, or go to jail? Or go to Mercy. Well, I chose to go to my counselor. And I thought my sponsor took me, but Wendy enlightened me. She took me to my sponsor in Milton, to my counselor in Milton, where my sponsor met us. And he's trying to get me a bed in a treatment center somewhere. Meanwhile, you'll know why in a minute. I got up and I'm going to walk home from Milton. We live on the north side of Janesville. I'm going to walk home. And I get like 100 yards from the door and they're yelling at me and everything. Something made me think I better turn around. So I did turn around. Mike, my sponsor, drove me up to Meriter and Madison. So I hadn't really drank much that afternoon. So I looked this up. My ethanol level, which that's an ethanol alcohol, was 135. And I looked on the little chart. The normal is 0 to 10. At 9:45 in the evening, I blew 0.931. At 11:21, I blew 0.61. Now, anyone that knows anything about it, 0.4 is like point where you die. And I didn't realize till last night when I was researching this stuff, I just looked up highest blood alcohol levels ever. There's some Polish guy that was off the chart, 1.5 or something. But that 0.931, that's higher than most of them report. I'm surprised they haven't tried to do a study on me or something because I don't know how I made it. Yes, I do. So, I forgot the part. When I was in the emergency room with Mike, because they put me in the emergency room before they could take me up to the treatment or whatever, I'm laying there and I'm like, F this. And it's like on TV. I pulled all the things out. There's blood squirting out of my arm. And he's like, he was just calm. He's like, what are you doing, dude? So he took me upstairs and, I wake up the next morning. I'm like, how did I get here? I'm in the nut ward. One guy had just gotten out of prison for robbing a bank and all these other things. And I'm like, I'm an educated person. How did I get here? Alcohol does not discriminate. Drugs do not discriminate. They just want you. That night, when I was in the hospital, you can call me crazy or whatever you want, but I heard Jesus whisper in my ear, I'm not done with you. Honest, to this day, till the day I die, I will say that. So Wendy's getting a hold of my parents, and she's like, he's going to call you. Don't go pick him up. So I did. No luck. And the worst part was the roommate they put me with, the dude he sounded like 5 lumberjacks in the forest when he was sleeping. I'm like, oh, but I know now why they kept bothering me every half hour to take my blood pressure and stuff. Anyway, so I made it through that. I still had the good manipulating mind. I came home after 3 or 4 days. I talked them into it. They put me on naltrexone. Yeah, it's supposed to prevent your cravings or whatever. So from that day on, everything's been good. One thing that was really cool was 1 week after my 1-year sobriety, my mom passed away. And I say that's cool because it's like she wanted to see that year. And it was also really cool before that, a week earlier, she got baptized again as an adult. Like she knew it was time. You know, there's all these little God moments that I can see now. But, you know, those spiritual moments kept coming. I got rid of my boat because that was a good place for drink. I love fishing. But it was just, you know, I drank every time I went fishing. I would go out on Lake Koshkonong and just troll because what do? You set the rods out, drive around, and drink. I don't know how many times I drove drunk, pulling a boat even too. So Mom passed away. And, you know, it was time. She had emphysema, was on oxygen. She used to say my life is as far as my tube reaches. But one thing that happened, I think I got some brain damage along the way. Wendy will agree. My short-term memory sucks. But I have trouble getting really emotional, too. I didn't cry very much when my mom passed away. It doesn't mean I wasn't sad. But also my spiritualness comes in. You know, I realize that's part of life. It's the cycle. You know, life's going to go on with or without me. And if I let it go on without me, then I'm going to run into trouble. So I try to roll with the punches. Wendy had a friend who's an alcoholic that she used to work with, and Wendy would ask her about it. And she kind of explained it as, you know, alcoholics used to be like way up here and way down there. And kind of the goal is to just kind of stay in the middle now. And I really try to have that. I have a lot of peace in my life. Not much gets me riled up because that serenity prayer is huge. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't control. The more I looked at that, I don't control diddly. Maybe this 2 inches around me, you know. The courage to change the things I can. But that last line is probably the most important, the wisdom to know the difference, you know. So everything's going good. In 2019, I go to take a nap, and it's an especially long nap. Wendy probably thought I might be drunk or whatever, and she came in and she feels my head. I got like 103 fever. So she takes me to the emergency room, and she'll still laugh about this. And she's explaining to the nurses, you know, when they check you in, what's going on. And I'm sitting in the chair. Mind you, I don't curse much, but I'm like, she's fucking lying, this and that. She knew something was wrong. I had cellulitis in my leg. So that was like 2 weeks of getting IVs to get that all cleared up. But Wendy told me the reason that she came and checked on me was my mom told her. And my mom had been passed away. So it was another one of those God moments. Um, so what's it like now? I try as much as possible to discard the fear-based life. I missed so many things in my younger days. Jeff knew me when I was a lot younger, and it might not seem like, but I was just scared to do stuff. I had phobias about everything. I didn't like, right now, me and Wendy go all over the place going to concerts and stuff. Google Maps helps with that. But I had this really big fear of driving in cities where I might get lost. And just fear, I was afraid what people would think about me. So, I wouldn't do things because they might think I look stupid, or when I was drinking, I did look stupid. The biggest part of my recovery, and for some reason I've been on this kick lately during meetings, was accepting the grace of my God. Because there's no strings attached. I just have to accept it. I have to believe. That's it. The past is, your sins are forgiven as far as east is from west. And you think about it, the globe goes around. So east and west never ends. And I still talk to people all the time, and it's hard for people. You got that guilt and that shame. That's the tools of the devil, man. They want to bring you down. I can't change the past. AA helps me realize that. I can make the future better based on the past. When I was talking to someone recently, and I'm like, we're talking about, could you change this or change that? I don't know if I would change anything, because they would have a huge ripple effect on everything else. And I like where I'm at right now. I was going to bring it with me, and I forgot. My mom, one of the things I saved from my mom is just a little thing. It sits on our windowsill by our sink, and it says something about God never promised you a smooth path, but he did promise you a safe landing. In other words, like Ray used to tell me all the time, shit's going to happen. What am I going to do about it? Sometimes I don't do anything. That's the way it is. But one of my biggest sources of all that guilt and shame are my two sons. I was talking to my friends earlier. One of them's 32. He's going to be 32 in a month. And the other one's 29 going on 30. Jeffrey, the oldest one, I have not been with him. I wrote 2011, but I remember they came to our wedding.
He did.
No.
He came to the Packers.
So 2011, the last Packers Super Bowl. I have not seen or heard from him since. Jacob, my youngest son, we did pretty well for a while. And then all of a sudden, about 2016, nothing. The last contact I had with Jacob was I handed him an envelope with $2,500 cash for college. Poof, gone. And the hardest part about that was what it did to my parents. Neither one of them came to either of my parents' funerals. And they were just the darlings of my mom and dad's eye. And I'm sure the alcoholism and all that played into it for me, but they got taken out on my mom and dad. And that was really hard to get over with. But I don't control that. Back when it was first happening, I tried to control it. And the more I tried to weasel my way into their lives, farther they push. They're a lot like their dad. But I can't live there. I can't live there. God wants me to be happy and productive the way I am. And I think part of that, living through that blood alcohol level and all that, is I have a message to share with other people. I don't care. You like it or you don't. I got to let go of the past. As far as meetings, I've been to a lot of meetings, not like all over the place or whatever, but meetings are kind of like life, and it's a lot like my teaching career. I used to have a lot of teachers work around me, and I take what I like, what I need, and I leave the rest. If I go to a meeting and it rubs me the wrong way, I don't have to go back there. Or they got rules I don't like, fine. In the past, before it would be more fun, or I would think it'd be more fun to bitch and moan about it, and I'm not going to change anything anyway. The steps are not one and done. You got to live the steps every day. And if you're not from Alcoholics Anonymous, the steps are good for anybody. It's a good way of life. But one day might be focus on this one day on that one. One thing you got to do perfect, and anyone that's been to meetings in here knows you got to do step 1 perfect. I am powerless over alcohol, and my life will become unmanageable if I dabble with that. Step 10, a lot of people say, well, you should do it at the end of the day. No, I like to do step 10 right then and there if I know it. And that's, when you mess up, fix it. Bob's here tonight. Thanks for coming, Bob, because that crow tastes a lot better young than it does when it's old. I learned that from you. Same with character defaults. If you read the steps, it says give your character defaults to God. That's a daily basis because they didn't ever go away permanently. Different ones crop up at different times, and you deal with it then. I don't have to do all of them all the time. The serenity prayer is huge. There's those 3 lines. If you just remember that, you got a pretty good chance of having a good life. That last one, the wisdom to know the difference. Years ago, for me, it used to be the stupidity to try to fight it. One thing that I did for myself, and I would recommend to anybody, is I take notes at every meeting. You see me show, I was going to bring it and I forgot it because we went out there. But I got my little bag with my mini big book and my daily reflection and my journal. And when I go to a meeting, I just write about whatever the topic was. Maybe someday some archaeologist will find it in a jar in the desert. But another one of the best things is I bring a lot of stuff home and Wendy picks up on it. And we use the principles of AA, by far the best marriage ever. It took me 3rd time's the charm. I know you beat me, Sally, but no, good or bad, I learned something along the way each time. But Wendy and I, one of the things we did at our wedding is we've got a God dot. It's me, her, and God. A strand of 2 is weak. A strand of 3 can't be broken. And it crops up. We'll be sitting there. I got a resentment. What? No, I say that. And actually, I did say it today. We were talking to the neighbors, and she brought up something that made me really, really uncomfortable. And I didn't say anything until we went back in the house, and I said, I got a resentment. And I told her, and she said, I'm really sorry for that. I said, okay, it's done. Because it's done. We don't throw daggers at each other. You got that little thing you're saving for when you're in the middle of that argument, and I'm going to use that. In fact, one thing that I learned, Duncan, never pass an opportunity to keep your mouth shut. That frustrates the heck out of her sometimes, but I try not to engage because I'm going to, in the heat of the moment, I don't want to have to make up for that later. So a lot of times, we take our distance and then settle it later, and later halftime it ends up being stupid anyway. Honesty. You got to be honest. Good, bad. If it's going to sting you a little bit, whatever. I tell Wendy, I'm sworn to a code of honesty. So if you ask me how you look in that dress or I try to live on the edge of my comfort zone now. When Wendy and I first got together, I was a stick in the mud, and I have to apologize to my 2 in-laws that are here because I know many times I was at their house and I was probably not much fun to be around. I regret that, but I'm not going to dwell on it. One of the things I started recently is I've always had a bunch of phone numbers in my phone from different people, but I got this little black book that I had a while ago, and on it says plans for world domination. And then I added to it zombie apocalypse emergency numbers, but I'm getting numbers from people that I didn't have their number before. And at this point, because it's only like a couple weeks, I'm texting people that I normally wouldn't text during the day. Eventually, I'll get that 1,000-pound phone, and one thing Wendy and I really agree on and try to do is make the most of every moment. Part of that is my mom died suddenly. We knew that was coming. My dad had cancer, and I got really educated. If I knew anyone with cancer now, I can tell you what to do and what not to do, because that was a mess. And I watched my dad wither away to 120 pounds. And that's a good God moment. I know I'm going over, but one of our really, really, really strong spiritual experiences was my dad was in the hospital. It was his last day. He hadn't eaten for a long time. He just kind of gave up. He was okay with the cancer at first. The chemotherapy was all right, but then that radiation just kicked his butt, and he just was downhill from there. But on the last night when we went to be with him, and we were holding his hand when he passed away, he had this guy nurse that used to be an EMT. And he told us a story. The night before, he had went to check on my dad in his room, and my dad hadn't walked in months. He went to check on my dad in his room, and my dad was at the side of his bed praying. And this EMT told me that he has seen a lot of things. He's not a Christian or whatever, but he said that really affected him. So we were with my dad, and he loved going to church. He loved Central Christian. So he was pretty much unconscious. The end was near. And Wendy and I pulled up Central Christian Services on the phone, and we're playing it to him. He starts tapping his finger. Oh, wow, that's cool. And then he's like, he's asking me about, why is this taking, what's going to happen? I'm like, Dad, it's on God's time, not yours. And he says, what's taking Jesus so long? That was probably his last words. And so he passed away, and
He passed at the moment in the church service that somebody was being baptized.
Yes, that's right. I forgot that. Right as someone was getting baptized. But on that day, I lost more than I had more time with my father after he retired than I ever did all those years growing up. We went fishing together. We played golf together. So I lost a lot more than a dad, and that was tough. But through our faith, we know what the deal is. So Wendy and I really try to make the most out of life. We're both 56 years old, and we had the opportunity to retire, and we're like, let's do it. I'm not going to wait. He's like, I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. We're not the richest people in the world, but we do all right, and we're doing things that we want to do now. That bucket list is kind of getting checked off. Yeah, everything is really, really good. I start my day praying to God. Get me through that day sober. But the one thing I never forget is I ask for God's protection from myself and the world around us. Because Satan prowls like a lion ready to pounce at the smallest crack in my armor. That's why my Facebook group's the Armor of God. I kind of live by that now. And you know what? If I got Jesus on my side, nothing can mess with me. So thanks for coming. That's my story, and I'm going to stick with it. Thank you.